Do you have a headache? Are you in a bad mood? Do you think you might be homosexual? Then have a lobotomy and you will forget all your problems and find peace. Recently, videos like these have been gaining popularity on TikTok. But what is a lobotomy really? Is it a panacea, or truly an evil from the world of psychiatry? Prefrontal lobotomy, or leucotomy, is a surgical procedure developed by Portuguese neurosurgeon Egas Moniz in 1935. During this operation, a hole was drilled into the skull, through which a loop was inserted into the brain using a guide. Rotational movements were then used to sever the white matter, which acts as a bridge connecting the frontal lobe with other parts of the brain. As a result, one of the brain's lobes was disconnected from the rest, or even completely removed. After the first 100 operations, Moniz observed the patients and made a subjective conclusion about the success of his development. He described his treatment method as follows. It was assumed that patients underwent such a procedure would be diagnosed with frontal lobe syndrome. This involved a reduction in responsibility, self-control, creative activity, memory, learning ability, attention span, and a decline in intelligence. Emotional flattening, apathy, and lethargy were also inevitable. Egas Moniz proposed this method for hopeless patients who posed a social threat. It was believed that this would give them the opportunity to leave the confines of specialized institutions. However, in practice, the method quickly began to be used for depression, neuroses, and with difficult children. By the mid-20th century, lobotomy had become an incredibly popular procedure. It was practiced in the United Kingdom, Japan, the United States, and many European countries. However, alongside its use, lobotomy faced disapproval from Moniz's contemporaries, who wrote that the actual result of such an operation was the degradation of the individual's personality. And this was indeed the case. After the operation, patients experienced confusion, numbness or tingling in the limbs, and sensitivity to light and sound. Long-term complications included seizures and the recurrence of previous symptoms. Despite its apparent contradictions, the Nobel Committee considered lobotomy to be a groundbreaking discovery ahead of its time. In 1949, Egas Moniz was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology, or Medicine, for the discovery of the therapeutic impact of leucotomy in certain mental illnesses. Subsequently, relatives of some patients petitioned to have the award revoked, as lobotomy caused irreparable harm to the patient's health, and was generally seen as a barbaric practice. However, the petition was denied. The popularizer and true enthusiast of lobotomy was the American psychiatrist Walter Jackson Freeman, who developed a new technique known as transorbital lobotomy. This method no longer required drilling into the patient's skull. Instead, a slender surgical instrument was placed on the orbital surface of the frontal bone, and with the help of a surgical hammer, it was driven through the thin layer of bone and into the brain. Freeman turned the operation into quite a show, and a rather inexpensive one at that, costing only $25. Newspapers wrote about Walter Freeman's surgical theater. Essentially, these were tours as he traveled across 23 states in his van. Each operation became a sort of performance or masterclass. Among the numerous patients he treated were 19 minors, including a 4-year-old child. There is a known case of a person who died during a photo session. While posing during an operation, Freeman drove the ice pick too deeply into the skull. A notable example of his work is the case of Howard Dully, who underwent a lobotomy at the age of 13 at the insistence of his stepmother. She found it difficult to handle a hyperactive child who, in reality, had no mental disorders. Dully lived to an old age and was able to describe his traumatic experience in the book My Lobotomy. Despite the fact that over time nearly all of Freeman's colleagues turned against him, he continued performing operations until 1967, when his last patient died from a brain hemorrhage. This was not the first case, But it was the final straw. Freeman finally had his medical license revoked. In the United States, lobotomy was completely abandoned only in the 1970s, but in some countries, it was performed even into the 1980s. The last country to ban lobotomy was France. Today, lobotomy is considered one of the most shameful Nobel Prizes in history, with tens of thousands of victims serving as a testament to this barbarism. If you enjoyed this video, you can support it by liking and leaving a comment. A big video is coming out soon, so stay tuned.